Welcome to Nalbinding 102. I'm Mistress Silverhair, and I'm going to be teaching you the Russian stitch today. If you've never done Nalbinding before, I suggest that you watch Lady Jana's video with the Oslo stitch first. She'll go through a lot more basic introductory points that I'm going to assume you already know how to do. This is one of my favorite stitches because it's not too hard to make, and it's very warm. You'll see this is what it looks like as a finished piece. And one of the things that's fun about it is that the other side looks completely different. When you make this stitch, it makes little tiny loops on the inside, and that traps the air and makes it very warm. When you're choosing a yarn for this stitch, while it's true you can use any yarn you want, even very thick, bulky yarn, I would suggest using nothing more than worsted weight. So either worsted or sport weight or fingering. These two samples right here are done with this fingering weight yarn. This is a sport weight yarn, so it's a little bit heavier. But what I'm going to be using today, just for demonstration purposes, is something that's a little bit heavier than worsted weight. What happens when you use this, though, and you'll see this as we go along, it becomes a little bit stiff. And so one of the things that you'll have to be careful about is keeping your tension appropriate for the size of yarn that you're using. So let's get started. I'm going to assume you've already threaded your needle. Now I start a little bit differently than Lady Jana. And what I do is I take the end of my yarn, wrap it around my fingers one finger a couple of times, and then pinch it. So pinch it so that the working thread is coming on the inside of my hand between my thumb and my index finger. And the tail of the yarn is over here on the outside and towards the back. You're going to want to make sure that that's not too long, but that it's long enough that when you need to, you can keep it out of the way. So once you've got a couple of loops on the back of your thumb, on the pad of your thumb, you want to take your needle and pick up one loop from the right towards the left, turn your needle and go down through the other loop and under the thread. And when you pull that tight, it's now attached to your thumb and it's not going to go anywhere. But that's not enough yet to actually do the Russian stitch. The Russian stitch requires 2 loops on the back of your thumb and 2 loops on your thumb. So we're going to do that again. We're going to look at the back where you have 2 loops. You're going to go through the farthest back loop, move your needle forward, come through the second loop, turn your needle and go underneath the loop and the working thread. Now you have 2 loops on your thumb and 2 loops that you can see on the back of your thumb. Now the fun begins. To make the Russian stitch, you're going to go through the first back of your thumb loop from the back of the loop towards the front, which sounds difficult. If you try and do your hand like so, that's like, oh, that's uncomfortable. But you don't need to do that, because as the loops form, they begin to turn sideways. So you can just take your needle and go through that loop. And then you're going to take the top loop on your thumb, and go through that one from the front side of it towards the back. Turn your needle and go under the loop and under the working thread. Now you have 2 loops on your thumb again, and more on the back. You're always going to take the newest loop on the back of your thumb, and you're going to aim from right to left, and then the top one from your thumb loop, and turn it and go under. And as you keep making the stitches, it grows off the back of your thumb. Pick up 1 loop from the back towards the front, turn and grab that loop and go from the front towards the back. Now you have 2 loops on your needle. Turn and go underneath both the loop and the working thread, always underneath both, and pull tight. So as you keep going, you're going to wind up with a very long string of stitches. At some point in your life, you're probably going to need to put this down. Whether it's to add a new thread, or the phone rings, or the kids need something. Now you have to figure out how to put it back on your hand. The good way to remember is that the working thread is always coming underneath the loops. If I tried to put it back on my hand this way, the thread's coming out at the top, and that's wrong. So there are 3 loops. And you want to put them up back on your thumb so that you have the loops here, your working thread here, and now you can make 1 loop from the back of your thumb, the front one, and underneath the same as before. And you're ready to keep going. So when you've made a lot of stitches, you'll see that it twists up a lot more than the oslo stitch twisted up. So it's very important to get all of those twists out before you make your ring. So very carefully twist it down to the beginning. And when you have all of the twists out, wrap it around and hang on to it between your thumb and your index finger. So now you'll notice that what used to be the outside, the top of the stitches that you were making, is now on the inside. And the part that you didn't see before is what you're looking at now. So just like when you're making the oslo stitch, you're going to pick up a couple of loops from your ring and then proceed to make a stitch just like before off the back of your thumb. And then it's joined together. Now, after you've made that first stitch, now comes the difference between the Russian stitch and the oslo stitch. The Russian stitch is made with what is called an F2 connection. What that means is for each stitch, you're going to pick up one new loop on the ring, the next loop that you haven't used yet, plus the next one that you just used in the stitch before. Then you pick up the loop from the back to the front, which now that it's joined is very easy because it's right where your needle wants to go. And then you take the thumb loop from the front to the back. So at this point, before you twist your needle and go down through the remaining loops, you have 4 on your needle. 2 from the ring, 2 from your thumb. Pick up 1 new loop, 1 old loop, 1 from the back of your thumb, 1 from the front of your thumb, 1, 2, 3, 4, turn and go under the remaining. Always being sure that your newest loop comes to the bottom of the list. This is the newest loop that we just made. One new loop, 1 old loop, 1 from the back, 1 from the front, turn, and go under the remaining thumb loops. And you'll see as you join and continue around the ring, it tends to flatten out. And again, I want to put this back on my hand. I want to make sure that my working yarn is between my thumb and my index finger, and the loose loops go over my thumb. I pick up one new loop, one old loop, one from the back of my thumb, one from the front. Turn and go under. And here you can see the difference that it makes depending on what size of yarn that you use. This fingering weight yarn is very soft, would make a beautiful mitten. There's a lot of air space in the loops on the inside to trap that air and keep you warm. With this heavier yarn, it's stiff. And the loops are much tighter, so they won't hold as much air inside to be warm. So one of the things that you have to pay attention to as you are choosing your yarn and deciding what you want to use is the tension that you're doing your stitches. The fatter your yarn is, the more loosely you need to make the stitches so that you can keep some of that air space in all of the loops. So once you've gotten a couple of stitches under your belt and you're feeling comfortable, you're probably going to want to actually make something. And that will be a whole different video. But what you need to know in order to make something more than a wrist warmer or a bottle cover is how to increase and decrease. And that is pretty simple, because just like you were doing knitting or crochet, if you want to increase, you're going to make 2 stitches in the same location. So here we'll make the first stitch, picking up one new loop, one old loop, one from the back of my thumb, one from the front, turn and go under. Now I'll make the second stitch in the same location. So I'm actually going to pick up 2 old stitches and then one from the back and one from my thumb. Now I have increased 1 stitch. If I want to decrease, equally simple, instead of picking up 1 new loop, pick up 2 new loops. 2. Then pick up an old loop, one from the back and one from the front. Turn and go under. And that's a decrease. And once you can increase and decrease, you can make almost anything that you can think of. And we'll do another video where we can make some hats or mittens or socks, and we'll show you some tips for making things that fit correctly.